Welcome to the UTOONI episode. You're expecting a cold open, aren't you? Well, not today. I am just gonna go straight into talking about everyone's favorite Jawas. Every character in Star Wars Hunters is unique, that's for sure. But UTOONI is one of the most nigh incomparable characters I've ever seen in any game. While everyone else is acting a part, reading their lines, and doing their little choreography, UTOONI is like an improv actor that accidentally ended up on the wrong set. UTOONI is like the Cat in the Hat as a MOBA character. UTOONI is basically Peacock from Skullgirls. UTOONI is Steve Minecraft in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Nintendo Switch family of systems. Basically, they're an absolute maniac. Two absolute maniacs, stacked on top of each other, trying to trick their way into an R-rated movie. Can I tell you something? Nobody knows what their individual names are. And I'm being serious. I have scoured websites for hours and hours with absolutely nothing to show for it. These two sure aren't going to tell us, because apparently Jawas communicate through scent as well as their weird little noises, and under no circumstances will I be getting close enough to a Jawa to smell it. Together they are UTOONI, and separate they are nothing, because they don't separate, except when they're lying dead on the ground. But hey, just give them 5 seconds to respawn. Let's honestly just get right into it, huh? There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about in regards to UTOONI. First off, we're looking at the main weapons, and yes, I said weapons with a S on the end, because UTOONI is actually the first hunter to get more than one. These babies are the Pulse Blaster and the Arc Caster, and the best aspect of them is that their names rhyme. No, I'm just kidding. The best aspect of these weapons is that they allow UTOONI to do whatever they want, whenever they want. The Pulse Blaster is up first because it's the weapon you load in with. A lovely little gun, the game tells us that it will send enemies flying. It doesn't do that. What it does do is fire little purple orbs that have an infinite range and no fall-off point. This means that the bad boy will do 55 damage whether you're up close in someone's face or if you're cosplaying Diago up on the bridges of Endor. It's also got a neat little bit of splash damage that will deal 25 to 40 damage to nearby enemies, so even if you miss, you might not. You'll be able to fire about 5 of these babies before needing to reload. Weapon 2 is the Arc Caster, and I call this boy the Palpatine.
Good, Anakin, good.
Ever dreamed of electrocuting someone to death? Well, if you have, that's really dark, and you should probably see someone about that. Regardless, you can absolutely do that with the Arc Caster. This is the close-range weapon of the century, allowing you to literally pump your enemies full of high-voltage electricity. This does 25 damage per hit, which is substantially less than the Pulse Blaster, but it fires way faster, and lets you get in about 12 hits before needing to reload. The math here lines the weapons up to do about the same amount of direct damage per reload. You have to remember though, the Arc Caster can only hit one enemy at a time. The weapons are balanced this way because the Arc Caster cannot miss an enemy within range, while the Pulse Blaster relies more on your aim and is capable of that splash damage. Cool? These are both heat-based weapons, but there is a distinct difference in counterability. Interestingly, lightsaber wielders can actually deflect the Pulse Blaster's shots back, as long as they can catch it before the impact. Even more interestingly, the lightning from the Arc Caster cannot be deflected, but it can be blocked. Not for very long, mind you, and it'll often work its way around the block because of the extremely wide spread of the weapon, but it's still doable. Now that you know about Thing 1 and Thing 2, let's talk about the ability, Switcheroo. You can't have both out at the same time, so hand one to your brother, and he'll give you the other. At base level, this is just that, the Jawas swapping guns. Once you start to level it up, you get to the fun part. See, every time UTOONI swaps weapons, they gain a brief damage boost. It's only on for 2.5 seconds, but jumping your damage up by 10% initially and eventually almost 20% at max level is extremely satisfying and very helpful. Here's how the math works out at each level, by the way. Look at the screen, because I'm not saying this out loud, and you can't make me. You can tell that the Switcheroo bonus is active by the little purple light shining off the front of your gun. Since the cooldown for the swap is a measly little half second, you can basically keep this damage boost active the entire game if you really felt like it. Of course, the entire strategy with UTOONI is knowing when to use which gadget, so don't feel like you need to switch to the damage boost if your current weapon is going to do a better job of keeping you alive. Just so you know, neither weapon can deal critical damage, so don't worry about that. Oh, and by the way, my favorite aspect about this is that when you switch off of a weapon, it will continue cooling in the background, meaning as soon as you switch back to it, you will have a full clip ready to go. Let's dig into some other gizmos now, shall we? After Switcheroo is an ability that's literally called hands off. This is what my kindergarten teacher used to teach us the concept of consent, and boy was it effective against 40-pound 5-year-olds. Pull this baby out real quick and grab the trigger to ensure that no one is left in the area. Not even you. That part isn't a joke either. This weapon applies knockback to UTOONI as well, sending them flying backwards while their enemy goes in the opposite direction. This will do 65 to 75 damage, but you're not really going to use it for eliminations unless you're right near the edge or it's incredibly convenient. Instead, the focus here is emancipation, just like our forefathers that started this quote-unquote country. But they don't have America in space. Let's move on. Like I said, hands off is about the knockback. At base level, it does 1700 kbf, that's knockback force, to your opponent and 1000 to UTOONI. This means you'll get some airtime, but only about half as much as your opponent does. At max level, this jumps up to 2040 kbf for your opponent, but will always stay at that 1000 point for UTOONI. Now, you want to know how knockback works, right? How those numbers translate into your opponent flying across the map and away from you? Well, so do I, which is why I messaged my friend over at SWH Leaks to see if he could dig through the files and find something about it in the game. What he sent me was 1100 lines of code. Go ahead and take a look. Did that clear things up for you? No. Of course it didn't. Why would it? Why would I think for even a second that I'd be able to figure this out? Am I dumb? Don't answer that. I'll figure this out for another video. We're moving on. Hands off has a decent range, by the way, starting at 6.8 meters and moving all the way up to 7.85 at max level. Because of the shape of the cone that it uses to indicate area of effect, you can actually use this to land good hits on multiple enemies at once, even if they're not all clustered together. The one downside to this ability is the 7-second cooldown, so be sure not to waste it. Now, we know how to get some distance between us and our competitors, but what if you want everyone to just slow down and come together and do a big group hug? You know, relieve some of the tension on the battlefield. Well, UTOONI's got that covered too, baby. Meet the Ion Imploder, a nifty little device that actually uses the word implode correctly for the first time in history. The Imploder is used for drawing enemies into one spot, so that you, and hopefully your teammates, can put some damage into them while they're stuck. Think of this like Char's Trap, but with a bigger radius and the ability to centralize its victims. Your prey will still be able to shoot and slash and use some of their abilities, but no one is going anywhere for the next second and a half. Oh, and the size of this AoE might seem kind of small with these radius measurements, but that's because you have to remember that a radius is only half of the circle. Math. Now, does this help you get eliminations? Yes, but not directly. See, the Imploder only does 30 to 40 damage, which isn't really much of anything, but that's not the point. Having all of your targets mushed into one little spot is the point. At that point, you would then point your guns directly into the circle and massacre those people. Seriously, multiple people? Stand at a distance and fire the pulse blaster into the center of the group, and the splash damage will hit everyone that wasn't the immediate target. Just one person? Zap them with the arc caster like the bug they are to shred through their health bar. On top of that, your hands-off ability is a great way to deal a chunk of damage to a large group of people, ensuring that they won't get affected by the knockback anyway. Then, you can follow up with another pulse blaster shot to get rid of anyone who's still alive, without affecting your aim. Quick note, you can track exactly where this is going to land by holding down the button. At max level, the Imploder gains a slow effect that lasts for 2.5 seconds. So even if they survive the group hug, you can introduce them to another type of embrace. I'm talking about of death, of course. The thing has a 9-second cooldown, which is a bit long, but it makes sense considering how useful and deadly this little thing is. Now we're gonna talk about the ultimate. But Winton, isn't there another ability? Yeah, kinda. Anyway, UTOONI's ultimate is called the Scrap Cannon. Technically, if you look at the files, it's actually called a Composite Beam Cannon, but that's a mouthful, so I understand why they changed it. The cannon itself is a little red radio flyer wagon with a pair of binoculars and a satellite TV dish attached. The point of the ultimate is to spy on your neighbors across the street while watching Thursday Night Football. Hold on. No, that doesn't sound right. Oh, here we go. The point of the ultimate is to brutally eviscerate your enemies. That makes more sense. In a straightforward way, this a big laser. UTOONI gains 400 temporary HP, and as long as they have any of that HP left, the laser will remain active. Now, you're looking at this number and thinking, that's not a lot. What you should be looking at is this number, because that's what matters. Mathematically, that's 120 damage per second. I am not joking when I say that this ultimate might be the highest possible DPS in the game. This damage is unblockable by lightsabers also, but it doesn't cut through shields. As long as UTOONI remains undamaged, that 400 HP will last you about 10 seconds. Okay, quick aside, there are a lot of technicalities here, and that's coming from me, the person that wrote the weapon description. Not in-game, of course, Zynga still won't return my calls. First off, this is temp HP, but kinda different? Remember in the Sprocket video where I explained the different kinds of HP and how temp HP works? Well, those were simple enough because being bots, the med bot and the turret can't be healed or supplemented by other players. UTOONI, meanwhile, can be, but it doesn't mean the same thing. You can absolutely stim shot or rallying cry the ultimate because UTOONI still counts as a hunter, but it doesn't matter. The temp HP the cannon gets will sit on a different countdown clock from the temp HP that other hunters' abilities will give you. Doing so will provide a buffer, but it won't actually increase the amount of time that the laser can be active. Makes sense? Along with this, UTOONI's ult has a couple of drawbacks. When you activate it, you have to wait for the cannon to be built, which takes about 2 seconds. After it falls apart, you're gonna have to wait another 2 seconds for UTOONI to stack themselves back up. You can't fire your weapons or use your abilities or even move during those seconds, so you're vulnerable as hell. Better hope your team will be there to protect you, or else you're just kind of... You also can't jump while in the cannon, so choose the right spot to activate it. You wanna know something amazing, though? Since the cannon technically moves slower than UTOONI's move speed, this is not considered a movement ability, and therefore, you can pick up the trophy and the hut ball while activating it or having it active. This is a great way to soft lock the objective for a few seconds. Okay, alright. I can feel your eyes burning a hole in your screen, so let's talk about the thing I skipped. UTOONI feels fragile, right? 4 seconds of vulnerability around the ultimate, only 200 health, pretty long cooldowns, etc, etc. Let me ask you a question.
Do you feel death?
Well, with UTOONI, you don't really need to. Is death scary? Yes. But you know what's scarier? A live grenade. Well, scarier for your opponents anyway. UTOONI's special talent is called Surprise, and yes, much like a certain band, the exclamation point is actually part of the name. This is honestly pretty simple. When the Jawas die, they drop a special gift on the ground, and what a Christmas it is for whoever eliminated you. This grenade deals 100 damage at the center of the explosion, and you had better believe that is unblockable by lightsaber. The damage will decrease a bit the farther out you get from the center of the circle, but it's usually still enough to help you get an elimination. Unless you were just sitting there sucking your thumb while you were being attacked. Playing as UTOONI, you're gonna see this pop up a lot. Now, strategy? Pump enemies full of damage before they know what hit them. Yeah, okay, it's a little more complicated than that, but it doesn't have to be. Is someone far away from you? Pull out that pulse blaster and hit them with some snipe shots, or even just the splash damage. Getting closer? Okay. Hold them in place with the ion imploder, and then hit them with hands off to give yourself as much distance as possible. Has everything else failed and now they're on top of you? It'll be fine, since you've got the arc caster. Up the watts and give them the old maniacal laugh while you electrocute him. Maybe none of that worked. It's a shame, but it'll be okay because now you can wait for the grenade to go off, which might just solve your problems anyway. UTOONI's kit looks wacky from the outside, but when you put it all together, it makes sense. The Jawas are pretty breakable too, like I've said, so it's always a good idea to actually be friends with your friends. Hang out with your tanks. They'll protect you while you make it easy for them to shred through anybody that's coming after you. Always nice to stay in sight of a healer too. That 200 HP isn't going to last you very long otherwise. I honestly don't have all that much more to add strategy-wise. Make sure to be safe about where you activate your ultimate. Keep an eye on your cooldowns. And make sure to take advantage of the damage boost from Switcheroo. I personally have seen UTOONI do well in every single game mode. Their high damage and movement control options make them very formidable in squad brawl, provided they're not getting beat to death. Those same movement control abilities give them a great deal of, well, control in the point control modes. Hands off and ion imploder are both great ways to keep your opponents outside of the zone. Honestly, even trophy chase isn't too big of a challenge for the super Jawa bros. Granted, hands off doesn't have enough KBF at base level to make your opponent drop the trophy, but that's okay because it's not going to be your go-to during this mode. Ion imploder is really your tool for this because it does a great job of making sure that little golden robot doesn't go anywhere. Now, this is normally the part where I tell you to go to Patreon by teasing you with a longer video, but I don't have anything else. The kit doesn't really have any secrets, and once you put all the pieces together, the jigsaw's not that confusing. There honestly isn't even any lore to present here. I mean, even their brief appearance in the book doesn't really give us anything. UTOONI likes to be mischievous and tinker with things, and they would love to get their hands on everybody else's gear to see how it ticks. I just don't think that they'd give it back with all the original pieces. My favorite detail about UTOONI is that they have a skin that makes them look like Sentinel, just like a miniature version, but like a knockoff you'd find while walking through toy stores in Chinatown. Also, fun fact, that U at the beginning of their name is actually lowercase. I don't know what that means. So instead of sending you to Patreon for a different version of the video that you just watched, I'm gonna send you to Patreon for other stuff. Like pictures of my cats? In the meantime, just do the opposite of UTOONI and put your hands on the like and subscribe buttons. Then leave a comment, preferably in English because I don't speak Jawaese and luckily YouTube does not allow sense in the comment section. After that, well, I guess that's just about it. Good luck with the brothers, and I'll see you out in the arena. So long, Hunters fans.